it's time to talk about a book that everybody loves that I didn't like very much. Oftentimes when I am engaging in the fantasy genre, I find my tastes aligning with the masses. I usually like what other people like, but every now and again, we come across a piece of text that I am baffled by the reception of. And today we are going to talk about Empire of Silence by Christopher Rucchio, I believe is how you pronounce their last name. I see this book talked about in a positive light everywhere on the internet, and I don't understand why. So today, as I do with these series where I look at a piece of work that I don't enjoy, we are going to read some 5-star reviews to try to get to the bottom of why people love this book and maybe change my opinion, or at least see the other side. Because for me, this is a bloated, poorly paced, derivative piece of work that I did not enjoy at all, but I'm hoping that some of these books will illuminate another perspective for me so that we can get to some common ground, and maybe I can give the rest of the series a try with some understanding about what makes this book great for the people who love it. So let's do it. First up, we have a review titled The Name of the Wind, but in Space, which, if I had to boil down some of my main criticisms of this text, is that this is an incredibly derivative piece of work. Now, that's obviously not in and of itself a cardinal sin. Art is stacked upon itself. There are no new stories, there are no new tales. Everything is borrowed or stolen, and that's totally fine. But for me, there just wasn't anything else. It just felt like a couple mishmash pieces of stories that were wrapped in this sleek aesthetic and this immense and well-built world that just, the name of the wind in space for this person seems to be a positive thing. But for me, if I'm looking for the name of the wind, I'm going to read the name of the wind. So let's read a little blurb of this expansive review. You can check the rest of it out behind me if you would like to. Empire of Silence is a nicely crafted novel with an intricate and well thought out plot, a propulsive narrative, and a smooth as silk prose with lovely and lavish descriptions. While it's a hefty book, I agree, Rucchio has made use of every single page either to explore and expand his universe or to develop and flesh out characters when he doesn't move the story forwards. The story itself is original, gritty, grim, and intimate, with a steady pace that keeps building momentum up until the very finale. I guess if I squint at this book, I can see where this person is coming from. The pace, honestly, is my number one issue with this book. It feels 200 pages too long. It feels slow, incredibly slow at times. We didn't need massive sections of prose. I understand that, this is the first book in a series and you want to start the first book off doing a lot of work to set up a lot of the world building, to set up a lot of the character arcs early on in the story so that as the series goes on, you can, delve deeper into those character arcs. You can lean on the world building that you did in the first book, but we also need to have something interesting to continue to move us forward. And a lot of the subplots felt boring, for lack of a better word. The secondary characters felt incredibly flawed or incredibly bland or flat. As much as the main character, the protagonist, has a solid arc, we get pretty much none of that with secondary characters. There's one moment, I guess spoilers for this book. I can't really talk about this book without, kind of getting into some nitty gritty of the plot details. So if you haven't read it, go read it or don't read it. I don't care, but I'm going to talk a little bit more in depth about it. There's moments with, the female kind of urchin character that he comes across and tries to nurse back to life that felt like maybe we were getting some signs of life from his character outside of just, I'm a son of a military family, or I must do my duty and honor. But it just, everything jumbles together in my memory of this book because there really isn't anything that firmly stands out. These descriptions of well-paced, propulsive narrative, I could not agree less. It drags along. Every 200 pages, I had to check in with myself and be like, are we sure we're going to keep doing this? And a voice would ring out in the back of my head that said, yes, everybody seems to love this. Surely it will turn around. It did not turn around for me. I'm glad that this person had an enjoyable experience. Moving on. This is a 5-star review. This person really enjoyed this book. This is not some quick reading science fiction sword and planet story. Rather, it's a rich, layered take that creates complex characters, a universe that is vast and detailed, and a plot line that has no let up. It has no dull moments. I am concerned that we did not read the same book. This book feels incredibly slow. And slowness in and of itself is not a negative. Sometimes we need to sit in moments. I think one of the major gripes that I have with a lot of modern storytelling is that it is, I guess, the TikTokification or the lack of brain matter that people under the age of 30 have. I include myself in that as well. Everyone wants to just get something out super fast, or there has to be some type of action set piece or propulsive murder or some type of twist that keeps people engaged. But oftentimes we do need these moments of calm, these moments of slow, these moments to let the narrative breathe. I felt, unfortunately, that this book was 80% of that, and 20% of the propulsive plot was not enough to really carry me through. I felt like we got too many moments of just, let's grind the narrative to a halt, either because of the narrative structure. It is told as a memoir of our main character, Hadrian, from further on into the future, kind of reliving or re-looking at his youth. So oftentimes we would check back in with present day Hadrian, which would kind of just grind us completely to a halt. But also the narrative concession that Hadrian is still alive, right? So the stakes of some of these death-defying, harrowing kind of moments really lose a lot of their muster because we know that this person is reading his narrative to us, or is telling us his memoir, basically, which is another thing that I have a big problem with in Name of the Wind. If you are going to take that narrative conceit, if we're going to be told a story by the main protagonist, something else has to increase the stakes other than their mortal peril. And I feel like we don't really get much of that. Every time Hadrian in the past is running into an issue, whether, oh, am I going to starve from living out on the street? Am I going to get caught for going into areas that I'm not supposed to be going into? We already know the ultimate sacrifice is not going to be made. He's not going to lose his life. Unless, I don't know, maybe he projected his consciousness into, it is a sci-fi tale, so there's always some type of something, but from the narrative structure, we know that the stakes of morality are not there. So we need the stakes of something else. And I just feel like that was never really set up for us. I never really felt like our main character was ever in any type of peril. Even the peril of punishment felt, I guess, shallow, because we know that this guy is a god emperor basically in the future. So it just, I don't know, it felt like the stakes were incredibly low, and that kind of took away a lot of the tension building moments within the narrative itself. Another thing I want to talk about, and I think that it speaks to a larger or a grander issue that I am having with a lot of criticism of fantasy works or just narratives in general, whether it be film, television, or novels specifically, is this just need to dub something the new GOAT. You know, this book is talked about it at the same level of Dune, and at the, you know, these grand sci-fi genre-defining pieces of literature. And while I get the desire, or I guess the short-sightedness to say, oh yeah, this is good, this is just as good as Dune, I would be a little bit cautious when we're talking about these types of things. You know, with the fantasy space, we always, this is the next Lord of the Rings. I'm like, dude, what are you talking about? Pump the brakes a little bit. In film, when I was going through film school, it was like, this is gonna be the next Godfather, or the next Citizen Kane. It's like, let it be its own thing. It doesn't have to be the greatest piece of literature or media that has ever been made for it to be good and for you to say that you liked it. So I would like, just generally, when we are offering criticism of pieces of narrative structure, to, I guess, move away from the shallowness of just saying, yeah, this is good, this is going to be the next Dune. It feels a little lazy to me. I would, as an aside, I would say maybe dig a little bit deeper. Does it have grand, sweeping world building like Dune does? Yes. Does it have some philosophical ideas? Yes. Are they as deep in any way, shape, or form as Dune? I don't think so. Time will tell. We also don't have enough space away from this narrative. This is a relatively recent piece. I think this came out in 2019, 2020, sometime around there. Dune has been shaping culture, and generations have come up on this piece of work. There's been TV adaptations, movie adaptations, there's been iterations on the form. We don't have enough time to say this. So you could say maybe in 20 years, I could see this becoming, you know, as seminal as Dune or some of these other tentpole productions, you know, Lord of the Rings, Wheel of Time, whatever you'll say about it. We gotta pump the brakes a little bit. I'm talking to everybody that's making content about books or movies. Pump the brakes a little bit. Give the masters their respect. Give these tentpole franchises their respect. it can be a good book without it being, the be-all end-all world-ending piece of narrative fiction. Okay, we'll do one more 5-star and then we'll look at a couple 1-stars just to kind of balance and even out the playing field a little bit. Rukio has reignited a love for sci-fi that I haven't felt since my first forays into the genre, reading Robert Heinlein and Isaac Asimov. Again, pump the brakes. Rukio is a great author, but Asimov, this is what I'm talking about. Empire of Silence reminds me of the epic fantasies I have come to know and love, but set in a sweeping sci-fi political landscape that rivals anything constructed by Herbert. I respectfully disagree. I look forward to following Hadrian's evolution as a character, particularly as the transition from being the tale's hero to the universe's villain. This is a great, great stuff. 5 stars. I will say, there is a nugget in there that I think is very interesting, and if I decide to re-enter the fray with this series, I would look forward to that aspect, and that is the character growth of Hadrian. One thing that, although I did just lampoon the narrative style of telling a memoir, one thing that you do get is understanding that this character is in a certain place when we first meet them, when they are telling us their story. So it is interesting in and of itself. How many times have I said that? So it definitely can be interesting to see the character evolution as we go back. And I think that that is something that if Rukio leans on that, and I don't know how many books this series is going to be, I'm sure a lot, because it is very popular. If that is kind of the central thrust of the rest of the narrative, I can see why this could become a very powerful piece of media and could just continue to gain a lot of popularity. I don't know. Am I going to dive back into this? I doubt it. I just really could not find myself wanting to read the first book. It was such a slog. So I don't know. I'm sure that it gets better. I'm sure that for the people that like the first book, the rest of the series is going to be incredible. For me personally, I just don't know if I'm going to re-enter it. I respect everyone's ability to have their own opinions. And my goal with these videos is not to say, I didn't like this book, so no one should like this book. That is the dumbest thing on the face of this earth, and my ego is not that big. I didn't enjoy this book for some reasons that I've laid out. I respect that some people did like this book, and I think that they, for the most part, have expressed the reasons why they like this book. It just goes to show that sometimes art is subjective. It can work for some people. It doesn't work for others. That's totally fine. A couple 1-star reviews that I found that I think kind of do a good job summing up my overall feelings. This is by a wide margin the single most derivative book I have ever read. Young Quoth Atreides grows up in a life of privilege and power, learning from his father's mentat. Alas, he's not the heir. Instead, he is to be admitted to the Orange Catholic Church. I can't. I'll put the rest of it up. It's a very witty and interesting take on the fact that this is a derivative book at its core. But again, it's hard to criticize something in a negative light just because it is derivative. I think the fact that it is derivative and also is slow, poorly paced, in my opinion, too long, these things together really make it a disappointing read for me. It's very difficult. Sci-fi and fantasy fans are insulated most of the time, myself included. We like the stories that we like, so it is easy for authors to continue to iterate on stories that work. But when all we are doing is iterating on the same story, sometimes that can get stale. And for me, this felt just like an iteration and not so much, there wasn't enough new, for lack of a better word. There wasn't enough authenticity in the newer pieces of the story that I could really latch onto. But again, it's hard to fault anybody on that because the sci-fi genre is expansive and we pretty much have all the stories laid down. We've pretty much had them since we started writing stories down millennia ago. Like when we started telling tales on the campfire, people started iterating on those tales. So it's hard to fault an author for that. And I know how difficult it is to create media. I don't know how difficult it is to write, but I know how difficult it is to make movies. That is what I did for a living. I understand that process. There's nothing more terrifying than the blank page. So it's easy to jump on something for being derivative, but at the same time, this is how stories evolve. We read things, we are influenced by things as we grow, as we become writers, as we become authors, and those things seep into the narrative. I guess it just seems like it wasn't hidden very well with this. It seems very at its core derivative, and a lot of people are kind of picking up on that, and I think that's probably why it's souring some people. Finally, this is a really interesting perspective and paragraph that I didn't really think about, but when I read it, it kind of unlocked a little bit of why I didn't enjoy the book as much as I did. A portion of my disappointment comes from the immense gulf between what the book is and what the book purports to be. The back of the book claims we're going to experience the story of Hadrian Marlowe, who explores the galaxy, leads men into battle, wages a war of extermination against spacefaring aliens, commits regicide, destroys a sun, collects a series of cool-sounding sobriquets along the way. None of this happens. I might be persuaded to forgive this as the publishers and marketers trying to churn up excitement for the rest of the series. Unfortunately, Hadrian interrupts his own narrative regularly to tell us how awesome and tragic things are going to be for him and everyone who knows him in the future. None of these interesting events are in the actual book, and they don't take place. There may well be a dark and cool happening in Hadrian's future, but since the book couldn't be bothered to actually show them to me, I won't be bothered to read about them in future installments. At the end of the day, I felt like I was sold a bad bill of goods. I was offered a sweeping sci-fi, fantasy, space opera, and I didn't really get much of that in the first iteration. Now, there may be some great gems in further books in the series, but the art of writing a series seems to be a lost art. In a lot of book ones of series that I've read, it just hasn't happened. There hasn't been enough in the first book to want me to continue to read the series. And I get that that is difficult. It is difficult to spread these narrative arcs over 3, 5, 7, 10 book series. But we should be striving for greatness. We should be striving for greatness in the things that we write and the things that we read. And unfortunately, this first book, this first entry, did not do enough to say, this is worth your time to commit X amount of pages, because if you're going into the 7, 10 book range, that's going to be a year's worth of reading for people. And if the first book does not do enough to say, this is worth it, trust me as your author, I will take you to places that you want to go as a reader, then I think you can't give it any more of your time. And for me personally, that's exactly what happened. I was sold that this was going to be a grand epic space opera, and it still may be in the series completion, but the first book did not do enough. It really didn't. Maybe it's the writing style, maybe it's the prose, maybe it's just the pacing of it all. It did not do enough to hook me. But hopefully it did enough to hook you and you are experiencing some great enjoyment with this series. I truly hope that that is what is happening for you. Like I said, just because I didn't like it doesn't mean you can't like it. Of course you can like it. You can love it. It can be your favorite book in the friggin' world for all I care. This is a vehicle that I use on my channel to kind of introduce new perspectives, and I would love to hear your perspective. If you love this book, tell me why in the comments. That would be awesome. If you've got a little bit of time and you want to see another in this series, you can click on this video right here where I talk about why people like Gideon the Ninth, another book that I didn't really get, but other people love it. So go ahead and check that out. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you're reading something great. I'll see you next time.